Hello and good evening. Welcome to this special event that is the capstone of Westminster College's 2021 Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Week. I'm Dr. Tamara Stevenson. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I serve as the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Chief Diversity Officer, and I'm an Associate Professor of Communication here at Westminster College in Salt Lake City, Utah. I am so thankful to welcome each and every one of you, including our students, graduates, staff, faculty, and campus leadership, along with community partners, colleagues, and friends from near and far to this event that's happening now in this virtual format, which has become a new normal of connecting. I'm sure that you all have many options to spend your time. However, you've chosen to be with us. And for that, I thank you for your attendance and your support. Please help me recognize our presenting sponsor, the B.W. Bastian Foundation, which supports local and national institutions that benefit, encourage, and preserve the rights of individuals, promotes equality for the LGBTQ+ community, and support for HIV/AIDS programs. On behalf of the college, I'd like to thank the B.W. Bastian Foundation for their longtime partnership with Westminster to make this diversity lecture series and this event possible. Also, I extend gratitude to the following organizations for their partnering sponsorships of our diversity lecture series, along with the Bastian Foundation, including Cigna, Zions Bank, and Jones Waldo. At this time, I acknowledge Utah's indigenous populations, the Goshute, Diné, Navajo, Paiute, Shoshone, and Ute peoples. Please join me in acknowledging these communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We acknowledge their stewardship of Utah's lands through many generations. So before we get started, a few housekeeping details. To ensure that the event goes smoothly, please mute your audio and use the Q&A function to post your questions. The chat function will be used to message relevant information going forward, and this event is being recorded for archival purposes. We're also very appreciative of sign language interpretation provided by ASL Communication, and so for that, for you to be able to view them, please pin their screens or pin their boxes, if you will, on their screen. And there's also the option to use a live transcription and closed captioning as well. And if you have any questions, please use the chat function to let us know. Now I'd like to introduce my Westminster colleague, Jan Saeed, who is the director of our GPS office, known as from the acronym, the Global Peace and Spirituality Office. And this office, under Jan's direction, brings such an awareness of peace, conflict, and spirituality all together to this discourse about justice and accountability. Jan, I'm so glad to be partnering with you tonight for this amazing event. So please tell us more, and you'll introduce our speakers as well.
Thank you, Dr. Tam. It is my honor and privilege and blessing to be here and collaborating with Dr. Stevenson and be here with all of you wanting to approach this issue of really racism, race unity, of the beauty of Martin Luther King, his words, and how it inspires us every year. For the past 4 years, we've had something called a Unity Luncheon. We've been in person, we've had a sellout crowd, meaning we gave a free lunch and we had honoring different people in our community, and we had discussions at the table with different quotes that Martin Luther King has inspired us with his big legacy that continues today. I talked to the committee, and we just really didn't feel it was going to work very well this year to have a luncheon in sight. But Dr. Stevenson had the wonderful opportunity to meet Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz and Dr. Angel Acosta this summer. And with her suggestion, we've had some conversations that have just been delightful. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to introduce them. But just in keeping with what are we doing today, and as Tamara mentioned, the Global Peace and Spirituality Office, GPS, we're finding our way in the world together. We're trying to create global-minded peacemakers who are changing the world. And we all know that that is a necessary process for each of us, and we can't do it alone. And it is something that takes time, and we appreciate your time here today. I don't want to take much more before I turn it over to our wonderful guest speakers, but a quote that came to me within these last couple of weeks as we've had the amazing and horrible experiences that we're all going through on a daily basis, that Jay Johnson was saying this quote of Martin Luther King's that I just really, really resonated with me. We're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I feel like we're here today with some scholars to really help us do this, to unravel and ravel our interconnectedness. I'd like to welcome Dr. Angel Acosta, who works to bridge the fields of leadership, social justice, and mindfulness. He completed his Doctorate of Education in the Curriculum and Teaching Department at Teachers College in Columbia University. His research explored healing-centered education as a promising framework for educational leadership, development, and community care. As a member of the 400 Years of Inequality Project, he designed the Contemplating 400 Years of Inequality experience to support communities with understanding structural inequality through a mindfulness-based and contemplative approach. With an interest in better understanding collective trauma, he is currently collaborating with other scholars to develop group processes for collective healing. For close to a decade, he served as a program director for the national nonprofit CFES Brilliant Pathways. In that role, he supported educational leaders and their students by facilitating leadership trainings. And with that, he was trained under Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz, who we are so honored to have the two of them here today. Dr. Ruiz is an associate professor of English education at Teachers College, Columbia University. She is former research associate with the New York University Metropolitan Center for Urban Education and has worked for Business Week, the New York Times, and the New York University in marketing and promotion positions. Yolanda's work takes her to schools, colleges, universities, nonprofits, and other organizations all across the country and abroad. Her research has appeared as articles in several top-tier academic journals, and she is co-editor of 3 books, and one is just coming out, I understand. We'll talk more about that later. Though I will tease you with the title, Advancing Racial Literacies in Teacher Education, Activism for Equity in Digital Spaces. At Teachers College, she is founder and faculty sponsor of the Racial Literacy Roundtables series, where for 11 years, national scholars, doctoral and pre-service and in-service master's students, and young people facilitate informal conversations around race and other issues involving diversity and teacher education for the Teachers College of the Columbia University community. Yolanda appeared in Spike Lee's Two Fists Up, We Gone Be All Right in 2016, a documentary about the Black Lives Matter movement and the campus protests at Mizzou. Her first full-length collection of poetry, Love from the Vortex and Other Poems, her archaeological dig on love and intimacy, was published in March 2020. So welcome. I look forward to having those deep conversations today and that we all learn from you and from each other. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Wow, thank you so much. Angel and I usually, I won't say cringe, but we usually want as little as possible read. But Jen, we appreciate you reading those bios because inherent in those bios are what we believe and how we live our lives, you know, around love, around mindfulness, around the belief of building community. And so we are so grateful that you have invited us into your beloved community to spend this time with you this evening. Angel.
Yes, welcome everybody. Thank you so much to our dear colleagues. I step into this space just with true respect for the work that we're called to do. I'll continue to say this evening, but we are a very unique generations. We are called to actually respond to some of the world's most pressing problems, all at once. So it's only fitting that we honor King and step into this conversation today with respect, with a level of tenderness, and an approach that really allows us to do it in a way that we can stay in it for the long run. So Yolanda and I hope to model for you, how do we balance embodying King's legacy, building community, and also wrestling with the fact that we're dealing with one of the most polarized moments in American history. So it is with just utmost respect that we step into this space, and it really is a sacred space. So let's take a moment in the chat. I'd love to have everybody in the chat just share with us where you're logging in from. You know, what city are you representing? If anybody is logging in from New York City, where I am, in the Bronx, upon native land, the Wappinger peoples, let it be known that the Bronx is the best borough. There's no debating that.
I agree.
So
No,
let's
beautiful.
okay, and we know that Salt Lake City is representing hard tonight because this event is in honor of and in support of Utah. You know, I was thinking about the Utah Jazz. You know, they've gotten better as a team. They've gotten real better as a team, but you know, I can't let go of
the
Karl
Knicks.
Malone.
Oh,
Well, no, not the Knicks. Well, when Karl Malone and Stockton were in the Jazz, woo! I mean,
hot fire, burning fire.
Yes. So tonight we'll have fun. We'll have fun. We'll make you smile. We'll also get serious. We got some serious things to explore, and then we'll also give some opportunity to do some mindfulness practices, some journaling. I want to begin by just acknowledging California's in the house, but also giving the floor back to Sister Yolanda. She will share some slides, and then we're really much in the spirit of call and response.
Yes.
So if you see any of her slides and like you just want to respond, go in the chat and just share what you think, your thoughts, your responses. Once she's done with her slides, her and I will have a little conversation. So you can see how we can go a little deeper, and then we'll do a mindfulness practice after that. Sister Yolanda, please.
Yes, thank you so much. And you know, we are transparent, so you can see my desktop, you can see, you might see Robin D.G. Kelly's book, Freedom Dreaming. I'm reading that. I have a few things that I'm reading, but I want to share this visual. We want to share this visual because as we thought about this concept of critical love for reimagining our community today, the concept of breaking bread, the life and times and brilliance of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Angela and I were talking and we thought that we would have a bit of a collage, right? Of we do have love.
Sister,
that is,
Sister, your other screen is up, so you want to switch it.
My other screen is up. See? Which screen?
Yeah, the video is up, not the PowerPoint, not the
thank you so much. And please tell me, I know you got me always. Do you see this? Okay, do you see the collage?
Yes.
Wonderful. So thank you for that. And we were just thinking about images that we can share on one screen that sort of show us where we are, that there is love that we do have in our world. There is struggle, there is contention, and there is this moment in time with this pandemic where we're about to go into a very fragile time with the winter coming, that we do not know what will happen. And we know that it will require generosity of spirit, love, and care, and many of the things that Biden shared. And so we just ask you to sit with these images. These are images from our very, very recent history that invite us to think about what needs to be reimagined, and how. And we're going to ask very pointed questions tonight, both from a broad perspective in terms of our society, but also the local society of Westminster, even down to the point of how will you treat someone differently tomorrow? Right? How are you thinking about your practice in your classroom or with your colleagues, that you can find a way to hold yourself accountable for compassion and kindness? And I thank Dr. Tamara for reminding us that we are on stolen land wherever we are, that we are on land of our Native brothers and sisters, First Nation folks, wherever we are in this moment. And as Angel mentioned, here where I am, I live on Columbia University campus. I am from the Bronx, though, very proudly so. But there were about 14 different First Nation tribes that cultivated and inhabited this area where I am, known as Turtle Island, also known as Manhattan, if you will, and specifically Harlem. And in this space, although there were 14 First Nations peoples, there were the Wappingers and the Lenni Lenape who predominated this land. And it's important to open up with land acknowledgement for us to engage in truth telling. And we know that Bell Hooks tells us that truth telling is the beginning of honest conversations, and honest conversations is the beginning of love. And so we entered this space with that love, with extreme reverence and respect for all of you, our fellow human beings. And thank you for reminding us about our First Nations brothers and sisters. And so I'm going to, there's only about 5 or 6 slides, and I'm going to share them quickly, really as a grounding, right, for the conversation that Angel and I will have with each other and with all of you. And this is a racial literacy development model that I am theorizing, that I've conceived and conceptualized and was visualized by Dr. Angel Acosta. So you should know that the work that we do professionally, personally, is very intertwined. As I mentioned earlier, we live this work. And so oftentimes I can share something and he can visualize it. He can share something and I can visualize it. I won't go into detail except to say that each of these 6 components of what I'm calling the racial literacy development model is its own entity, its own area of exploration, its own workshop, if you will. And we're working on a new image now because we realized that having it in the form of a pyramid can give off the impression that there's a hierarchy, that it's most important to have historical literacy and that therefore critical love may be of the least importance. It is actually the other way around, right? When we think about the Blackfoot peoples, where Maslow actually took his hierarchy of needs pyramid from Blackfoot First Nations, this should be more in the spirit, in some ways, of Blackfoot nations, where critical love is at the top. But be that as it may, I will say that critical love is the foundation and that it cannot be moved. And I recognize that folks might be working out their critical humility while they are building their reflection skills, while they are learning historical literacy, learning to interrupt, but using the self, the heart, and the mind to do this work. But for me, in this work, love must be the foundation. And so the critical love that we'll be talking about this evening is one that it resonates with Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King when he talks about power without love is anemic, and that anything that is in absence of love is not justice. So it is impossible, according to King and his life and his words, to talk about justice without talking about love. These are intertwined, very much so with the work of Bell Hooks, Well, bell hooks, as I quoted earlier, reminds us that truth telling and honesty with one another is the beginning of love. And so we'll talk about love that, as in the description, is a love that is attached to liberation, very similar to Paulo Freire, for those of you who read that work on his raising consciousness. It is a love that we have to seek to practice within our own lives, to free ourselves from the stereotypes, the biases that we hold about people. We are all living under the smog of racism that Beverly Daniel Tatum writes about. And so since we know these things, we know that we have to deal with the self. And so this critical love, having a profound ethical commitment to caring for the communities that we work in and serve, must start with ourselves. We must free ourselves before we can invite our students, family members, partners, children, to free themselves of the stereotypes that are held about them, specifically talking about BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color. They're swimming in this every day. And so as teachers, for those of us in the classroom, our responsibility is heavy, but it is also quite beautiful that we can interrupt those we can love them enough to interrupt the stereotypes that they hold about themselves that keep them from being fully free. And so that is the model that I've been writing on, publishing on, working on. And I wanted to share this slide. Angel, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about this, and even you, Dr. Tamara, because this is how you met us. You met us by engaging in this public discourse around archaeology of self. So I actually would love to turn it to you, Dr. Tamara and Angel, just to say a little bit about that.
Yeah, please, Dr. Tamara.
Oh my goodness. I didn't know I was going to talk about this.
Not to put you on the spot, you know, we go where organically, we go where the spirit leads, right?
I am with you. I can do that. This was such a, now I know, so serendipitous. You know, I think I'm always engaging in self-love, self-work, self-reflection. And, you know, last summer was really intense, personally and professionally, doing this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, accountability, and justice. And so I was just looking for something to help me process all of this. And I happened upon the Archaeology of Self event in the summer. And I just thought, okay, I'll take a chance. And it was a mesmerizing experience. And even considering the virtual format we were in, and it was so many people, but it felt so intimate. The time went by so quickly. It was a Sunday afternoon when you're supposed to be having the perfect nap time. And yet this was just, it was energizing. It reinvigorated me and gave me the strength that I needed to go forward. And so when it was time to think about what we wanted to do for MLK, again, considering the context we're in, it just took me back to that experience. And I wanted to just share that experience with the whole world so that they could also get strength going forward. And so I'm just so honored and delighted to be able to just give you a piece of that. And hopefully we'll have more opportunities to go forward, but completely mesmerized, transformative, restorative, life-changing.
Wow, thank you so much. Angel, what's on your heart as you listen to Dr. Tamara?
A lot is in my heart. I want to see if your slide can move.
Okay.
Let's see. Can you go to the next slide?
Sure. Yeah. This one?
Yeah, good. Well, you know, the technology gods are working against us tonight. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. We'll embrace that because this work is hard.
To go out of the sharing and then come back in to get the slides to work.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So y'all were not able to see any of this deliciousness. Can you see it?
We saw one slide. We saw your first slide.
You've got to be joking me.
No.
Wow. Okay, well, let's do something about that. I'm so sorry. This is, well, it forces us certainly to listen to each other in a different kind of way, doesn't it? Were you able to see this, the Archaeology of Self slide?
This
there
is
we
the
go.
first time. Thank you.
Okay, the
There
first
we go.
time. Oh, so I talked through the entire model. Well, thank you for listening. I'll give you a moment to sit with it. Okay. And of course, as this is being recorded, for those of you who would like to look at it at another time, you will have that opportunity. It is also online. As with most of the work that we try to do, we make it as public as possible. And this was the slide that I was actually talking about. So these are advertisements. We held the Arc of Self again in the fall, a part 1 and a part 2. And I think we had over 150 people. So Angel, I invite you, now that we can see and we've listened to the testimony of Dr. Tamara, is there anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, a couple things. One is that the foundation of this diagram or this framework is this critical love. As a teacher, do you love the children you're teaching? Do you love your students at all levels? If it's in higher education, in this case, Westminster College, what's your relationship with those students? Are you going through the motions just to make ends meet, or are you engaging in purposeful teaching that really, that your love for not just the craft and the content, but the actual student is communicated? Are you humble? We all know that we have limits to our worldview. Are you reflecting on how you reflect? Are you attuned to the histories that are connected to your students? You have each student coming in from all kinds of different places, socially, culturally, economically. How literate are you in those histories? Are you practicing a kind of archaeology of self, excavating and digging in? Where are your biases? Where are your blind spots? It's almost comfortable to keep your blind spots on. To take them off is to dare to see your shadow. And we are in a moment in history where we don't have the option. We must look at our shadow. We must address our biases. Or else we may be positioned to reinforce, reproduce, not just the biases, but the very structures that continue to derail and limit people's life trajectories. And finally, interruption. Once you have skin in the game and you're committed and you understand what time it is for you as an individual, you must interrupt. You must interrupt. So I'll just say that for now, and I'm excited to start our conversation.
Mm-hmm. And so you saw this is just an example. What I wanted to do is I teach archaeology of the self as a framework in my classes, and I wanted to bring in the words of one of my students. And HW said that the archaeology of self is a spiritual and healing dig, discovery. She said self-evacuation. Now that's interesting because I talk about self-excavation, that as we're digging out the bias, the anger, the frustration, some of the hateful feelings, we have to have these honest conversations about, how we are socialized and some of the things that we believe. And as you're digging all of that out, what's being replaced? Sorry about the sirens. When I hear sirens, it just goes through me. And she talks about this self-excavation that can manifest love inward and outward. And so she talks about, I need to rid myself of all of the things that keep me from being fully human with others, fully seeing the humanity of others, and allow love to manifest and to grow. That critical love. And speaking of love, this is the words of one of my colleagues, where he said, we teach who we are. Our values, our character, our identity shows up wherever we show up. And the act of teaching requires love and is a loving act. Love requires vulnerability and healing. And so our teaching is a manifestation of who we are in the process of healing and caring for ourselves and others. So again, going back to that self-work, today I did a session with a group that the nonprofit group is focused on working with children of color, right? It's a somewhat diverse organization. But when I asked them about the trust that they had with one another, they don't trust one another. They work in fear. They don't really speak their mind. And so I share with all of you, what are your relationships like with your colleagues? Like, yes, we are talking about the importance of love as we interact with Westminster students, right? And others in the community. But are you focused on that part? And then you have a Black colleague or a Latino colleague or a mixed race colleague, and you don't treat them well. You don't treat them with kindness and compassion. And so what Angel and I want to do, if nothing else, is to invite your whole selves, all of who you are. Have you really looked deeply at the relationships with students, but also with your colleagues and those in the surrounding community, and see where critical love lives, how it manifests, or where there is an absence of it. I think we're not quite ready for this, Angel. I would love to come off of screen at this moment.
Please.
And stop share.
Yeah, such a pleasure to hear you, sis. And I want to kind of get us into a more interactive. So let's go into the chat. Based on what Sister Yolanda just shared with us, what's resonating for you? What's coming up for you? I know some of you are appreciating the pyramid as a kind of a possible developmental approach. You know, let's in the chat. What's one word that's coming up for you to kind of describe what's resonating for you right now? Let's have a couple of us jump in there. Yeah, reflection, start with love. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Cordelia. Thank you, Omar. Obaid, thank you so much. It is a dance. It is a dance, you know, and there's a lot of honesty and humility, right? Yolanda and I both have, you know, she has way more experience than I am, but, you know, she has taught at Columbia for years, and I have taught there, but we approach this humble. Sure, we have doctor next to our name, but we need to approach this very differently. We very differently. There has to be a different kind of pace, my friends. And in light of that pace, what we'll do now is Yolanda and I will have some back and forth. We want you to see the richness of how we can really dive into this conversation. So her and I will have some back and forth. If anything she says, anything I say, or anything that comes up for you in light of what we say, put it in the chat. This is going to be a really interactive moment, right? And thank you, Eleanor, for sharing your vulnerability there as a new faculty of color. My first, I have questions for you, sister. You know, we talk all the time, and I want to break some bread with you. In light of Dr. King's legacy, and in light of how you define and work with the notion of critical love, talk to me more about that. Both one, the resonance of King's legacy in your body, in your life work, and also why critical love.
Thank you for that. And I just want to share with everyone here that we didn't rehearse these questions. What Angel is teaching me, and we're each other's teacher, is the breaking bread that happened specifically between Dr. Cornell West and Dr. Bell Hooks, and talk about this idea of organic intellectualism, of coming to a space knowing that there are things that need to be held, and just having a conversation. So I want to thank you for that question, and let me see if I can answer it. And I'll answer it by starting with fundamentally what I care most about, and that is equity. That is teachers specifically looking at students through a lens of full humanity. I am concerned about people being free, because unless all of us are free, no one is free. The words of Toni Morrison, before I go specifically into the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, I affectionately call her TT Toni. You know, she talks so deeply about, you know, it's so much on my mind, I almost lost track of this, but Auntie Toni talks to us about languaging things. She talks to us about naming things. And for me, it's important to name racism. It's important to name the white supremacist structures that we have inherited for 400 years. And as we name it, to talk about how do we unravel it, how do we attack it. And so for me, when King says that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic, power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. That's how I see the concept of critical love, because first and foremost, it requires a liberation and a freedom. And once we break free of those stereotypes, those things that we often hold on to because we get power from it, we get stature from it, we get a reputation from it. So what King is saying, if the power that you are holding on to stands against love, then that's not justice. Then you are not a seeker of justice. So it's all connected to me, this idea of getting free, freeing others, always looking for justice, justice as it is connected to power, and power as it is connected to love. So I'm still working with that. I'm still unraveling just that one quote. He was such a brilliant, brilliant man, but I'm so drawn to when he talks specifically about love, power, and justice together. That's where I see critical love. The intersection of all of those, for me, is critical love. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. It makes sense. And I'm thinking about some of the questions in the chat.
Yes.
And also thinking about one of the questions that came in was defining critical love. So I hope that definition supports that anonymous attendee who asked that question. I really, there's so much, you know, I think, and I'm also thinking about King, you know, what he talked about in terms of power without love being anemic, and what Dr. West talks about in terms of love is what like justice looks like in public. So when we have institutions that are just, when we have institutions that do what they're supposed to do, it is a manifestation of love in public. So when the opposite happens, when we see a summer like the summer we had where it was hot, not just in terms of the weather, but in terms of the fact that Black death was so vivid. In this moment, I invoke Brother George Floyd, Sister Breonna Taylor, Brother Elijah McClain, Tony McDade, and the names upon names upon names of the people who we don't even have time to name. What I'm trying to say is that there is no critical love in a society that structurally is also deficient, where inequality is pervasive. When 2019 marks the 400th anniversary of the arrival of enslaved Africans to Jamestown, Virginia, and those 20 Africans who begin chattel slavery plant a seed for us as a wonderful contradicting society to morph that system into Jim Crow, segregation, convict lease system, the prison industrial complex, redlining, and modern day policing in many regards. So when I hear you, I feel the love, I hear the love, and then I also am thinking about the ways in which critical love doesn't exist in some of our systems.
Mm. Wow.
And now,
wow.
yeah, now why don't you respond to that if you'd like?
No. I'm just sitting with that. I'm sitting with so much of what you said, and specifically thinking about when you say modern day policing and thinking about the notion of historical literacy that shows up in the pyramid, and how many of us understand that actually the first precinct and the idea of the precincts were created to bring back the bodies of those enslaved Africans who were, you know, doing the human thing, seeking to be free, because bodies deserve to be free. And so precincts were established to go and hunt them and bring them back. And so when I think about police precincts, when I think about the way that some policing has manifested over time in particular communities, again, historical literacy matters, because we have to understand the past to also understand the present, which is why, to go back to the model, it has to be more than just love. And to answer that question, the word critical in front of it, usually when you think about, let's say, critical race theory or something that's critical, we use it in education, as you know, as a signal, right, to bring in those topics that we often ignore. So just with the term critical in front of it, we know that we're going to focus on race, class, gender, sexual orientation, religion, the things that we were taught not to talk about unless we were taking it in a class, right? But to not publicly, as Cornel West tells us to, and I think Bell Hooks, Cornel West, to publicly engage in these conversations is a sign of love. I think about Dr. Jan and Dr. Tamara having love for this community to want to hold these events. That's love, that they love you enough to want to say, well, let's get together and let's bring in people and let's talk about this.
Yeah. No, yeah, indeed. Sometimes it is the people who love us most who are willing to tell us the truth, or invite us into spaces where we can explore the truth. Just like Sister Chelsea just observed in the chat that, you know, she appreciates love, but then when you listen to the historical legacy of such a space like the U.S., there's an anger. There's an anger there that is so palpable and present. And so part of the practice is to still experience that anger, just not let it have the last word. See, that's part of what's happening, I think, with the polarizing politics, is that we're allowing those high emotions to have the last word. So if we're consumed by feelings of powerlessness, if we're consumed by the anger, if we're consumed by feeling left out, then it's easy to put a mask on and a Trump flag on and then storm the nation's capital. It's easy. Part of what we need to do is tone it down in terms of the temperature and sit with that anger, sit with that frustration, sit with that powerlessness, but engage in civil discourse. You know, I'm very much interested in this very moment we're in. It's hot, sis, don't you? It's intense. I mean, there's no way around this. The country feels like it's divided in half, and it's not even like it's an actual half, because it's not like most of us are here and the others are there. I have people in my own family who are operating off of alternative facts, and it's all good. However, we have to find some kind of common ground. And I think critical love may give us some insight there.
I'm ready for a sit. How do you feel? I mean, so much is going on in my mind. And you know what, the last thing I'll say is, I'm grateful for this space. I'm grateful for taking on this idea of critical love, doing a lot of reading now about archaeology. I'm beginning to do reading about indigenous archaeology. Brother Angel, you lead me into that so much. And And I think I'm just grateful that I've chosen to do work at this time in my life, at this moment in history, that does center love. Because people do have questions about love. What is it? How does it look? We know that there are multiple forms of love, but I just want to be very clear that the love I'm talking about is completely tied to justice, regardless of political affiliation. And I want people to understand not that it's about dismissing your political affiliation, but it's not a matter of politics, it's a matter of humanity. If what you're doing and thinking does not bring out the full humanity in another person or another group, for me, what I'm saying, it's not love. And it's not something that I don't think the human spirit should be pursuing. You don't have to agree, but if you know that it causes harm, that it is not kind, that it is not compassionate, even when you disagree, you have to begin to look at yourself in that way. Where is that coming from? And why am I choosing to not be kind and not be compassionate? And then when you're honest about that, you can say, oh, is it because they're Black? Is it because they're Jewish? Is it because they're not Mormon? Is it? That's that archaeology of the self. That's that excavation that cannot be done in a professional development. That has to be done lifelong in multiple ways. I'm glad that love can be the base.
And I know you want to sit. But I want to sit in the heat a little bit more. It'll be even more juicy sit when we do get there. But we have some really kind of comments in the chat around a couple themes. On the one hand, a colleague was talking about how love, power, and justice are so often misplaced and misused in the parent-child dyad and relationship, and then reproduced ad nauseum in social institutional relationships, especially in education. I want us to, this evening to bring the heat, bring the hard questions. And I just want to respond to that by saying that, yes, the trauma that we experience in the home get replicated, reproduced outside of it, right? So part of this moment is all of us need to become sophisticated in our own trauma, in our own shadow, in the ways in which trauma actually impacts our minds, impacts our body, because indeed, the body keeps the score. You see, sometimes that little pain in your chest, the little pain in your shoulder, it's not just pain, it's a psychosomatic manifestation of your trauma, of the ways in which you may feel silent, of the ways in which your boss doesn't appreciate you, of the ways in which the society you live in doesn't see you as fully human. So trauma in the home, replicated in the streets and in communities, is real. So, and there's so much research affirming how our ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are impacting our babies and impacting us longitudinally. And the last thing I'll say is that on some level, because of the pandemic, we are all experiencing some form of trauma, some form of post-traumatic stress. In fact, it's not even post-traumatic stress. It's persistent traumatic stress, right? So, and then let me even be more clear. It's a persistent traumatic environment. So how do we operate in a space where it's just so much stress? We relax. We relax. We have to build practices that allow us to kind of tone it down a little bit. Tap into our physiological structure to create feelings of ease in community like this one. I'll just say that for now, sis, because then I'll get too hyped.
No, that was powerful. And thank you for being hyped. Someone actually said their PTSD is being triggered now. I saw that Dr. Tamara mentioned racial battle fatigue. We know that is the work of William Smith. I was actually just on a call with William Smith the other day. This brother who has dedicated his life and his research to talking about exactly what you said, Brother Angel, the emotional, the psychosomatic, the physical toll that it takes. Let's say, for example, just being Black every day and not knowing, when you walk out, what you're going to see. And you see that manifested in certainly a lot of young people, particularly from a certain community, but certainly my community where I grew up in the Bronx, where when they say they don't expect to see 18 or 21, that's not a hyperbole. Like that is the way that the trauma has manifested, the way that their communities have been policed, the way that they have seen intergenerationally, the way that they've been taught. And so to get to 21 to 18 really becomes such a large celebration. And so Joy DeGruy-Leary also talks about post-traumatic, stress syndrome as well, connected to enslavement of 400 years back. So again, what you just shared makes me think about historical literacy, but also in a broader sense, what are the histories within our families, right? The histories within our families and how it's connected with the history of society. So much.
Yeah. And as you were listening, I was paying attention to the chat, and someone in the chat, beautiful being, said that PTSD is being triggered right now.
And I wanted to hold that person. Can we hold that person right now?
Well, we are. Yeah, we are. Because the reality is that the nature of suffering, the nature of the pervasive systems that we're living in, we can't wade through this water without feeling that heat. So we lean into that moment where someone may be feeling triggered, and we slow down, We even begin to use more soothing language just to navigate this conversation, right? We channel the intensity of the passion that we bring to this conversation, and we just slow down just for a moment and think about, with the pandemic. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Thank you for clarifying, John. The pandemic, and this is part of being responsive, right? And a student in our class may say, "This is triggering." Okay, yeah, let's stop, let's pause, and then there's a clarification. This is the kind of pedagogy, humanity that will be required if we're going to get through this moment. And the last thing I'll say in response to this little moment here is that, and I said it before, if we don't get it together in terms of how we deal with race and racism, how we deal with class, how we deal with sexism, and how we treat our beautiful women and our folks who are non-binary and our folks who are questioning and our folks who are transgender and our folks who are bisexual, if we don't get it together, the bigger challenge, there is a bigger challenge aside from those, and that's how we're treating the earth. That we have to get those pieces together, I think, in order to really, I think, move into being in right relationship with Mother Earth. Because Sister John, when she talks about the pandemic is actually a byproduct of our divorced relationship with Mother Earth. Our encroaching into nature resulted in the growth and overgrowth of the pandemic, of the coronavirus itself. So it's a lot to hold, it's a lot to hold, the pandemic, each other. And I'm just grateful that we can share this space tonight, and that I can be in dialogue with you, sis, with righteous anger and joy, right?
Yes. And righteous anger. And Brittany Cooper writes about this eloquent rage. And this is what these conversations look like. But when we don't have them, right, or we have them sporadically, or we have them and people get upset and they walk away, they just say it's too much, we don't get a chance to push through. And it is in that pushing through that strengthens us to be able to do this work. So I feel it in my body as well. And again, I too stand in gratitude for the 75 of us who are in fellowship together at this moment.
Yes. I want to maybe ask you one more really hard question. and then I want to invite us into a practice. And as my colleague Megan in the chat put in the chat, Resmaa Menakem's work around somatic abolitionism.
Yes.
And thinking about how some of these systems actually live in our bodies.
Be
you know,
great to
how
have a
some of the,
resource list, a resource. I'm sorry, I
yeah,
didn't mean to cut you, Brother Angel.
no, yeah. So as the resources come up, Sister Tamara, let's try to copy those together so we can send it to folks after. So I have one more question, Sister, and I'm really leaning into this moment of emergence, right? So I don't even have the question yet. Um, one of the questions that came up in the chat. There's a sister in this audience this evening that's hurting. You know, she's a teacher in one of the public schools, and she's hurting because as much as she wants to engage in critical love, Utah is number 4 in terms of COVID cases, and the fact that she has to go back into learning in person. So she's struggling. Is like, how do you sustain critical love when, on the one hand, you have beautiful babies to teach, yet your health could be compromised, and the tensions with like the state itself trying to, you know, struggle with reopening and the manipulation and oftentimes that happens there. It's just I just wanted to bring that up just to support her and to wrestle with that feeling right now with her.
And that imbalance, right, that exists. I have a daughter who is in remote school. She's 16. And at the beginning of the pandemic, Angel and I were in New York. And so we were the epicenter of the epicenter. And we experienced loss of friends, or I did, teacher friends, loss of family members, my sister's fiance's father. I will never get used to going to a Zoom funeral. I will tell you that. But Angel, when you were talking earlier about the imbalance, so much in this 400 years, this may not exactly answer your question, sister, or even offer balm in Gilead, but I'm just grateful that you were able to say it publicly, because I'm saying it publicly, we can hold you and know that you're not alone. But, you know, we're looking for answers at a time individually when it's going to take a collective consciousness, because this is 400 years deep. So it's not like we're going to get out of this overnight. And when I talk about the 400 years deep, I'm talking about the 400 years of inequality. And so when crises hit like this, because it hits those who are usually the least of us, and this society has never really prioritized the least of us, except for the use of our bodies, of what we can do to make the society work for others, we are stuck with these very questions. How can you expect me to be a teacher and to love my babies when a system is not loving me, when a system is not, you know, appreciating me? And what I say to you and to other teachers, I've been a teacher for 29 years now, this is where I take a nod from the ancestors. This is where teachers have to, in a grassroots form, bind together. My daughter's school, they tried to reopen it. The teachers got together and say, no, we are not going into that building. And so they had to reckon with it. The principal, who was a brand new principal, had to reckon with all of that. They tried a hybrid thing. There was enough parents that said, no, we're not doing, teachers, no, we're not doing it. And guess what? They're fully remote. So sis, instead of you, what I'm trying to say is, in being alone, who of your colleagues, your other teachers, unions, it's so much with unions these days that they've just been so embedded with corporations. I don't even know, you know, what's going on. But when you try to do it by yourself, no, you are going to swim in despair. This is where, for me, again, nods from the ancestors and grassroots organization of saying, no, we will choose humanity over this. And you know what? We'll get out of this. And education will be what it will be, and we will come through this. We have to be human in this moment. And if being human means trying to find others so that you're not alone, it may be that it's a different kind of work in order to survive this moment. I don't know if that helps, but I know this. We can't use what we have been doing. It's not working, not in this moment. And that's what we're seeing. Last thing I'll say, standardized testing, right? That was the end all and be all. As soon as we hit the COVID-19, standardized testing disappeared. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. Suddenly, we're able to survive without it. There's certain things that we will be able to survive without it if we have the courage to say, no, I won't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. And that, you're just trying to embody critical love, giving somebody full attention in terms of what they're carrying.
Yes, yes.
So I'm thinking one more hard question before we practice, just leading up to that beautiful practice we'll have together. Is there any question you have for me?
Wow. Wow. I do. Mindfulness, which you have introduced me to, and in so many ways has saved me, that along with prayer has really changed my life. And the work that you do specifically around mindfulness does look at race. And usually when we have practices or areas that really emphasize peace, and in this case, love, we don't really talk about the ugliness of racism. How have you been able to, as a Black man, as a Dominican American man, a man of color who has stories and legacies in your own family, what led you to mindfulness as a practice to see the world? And how do you navigate the racism, all the things that we're grappling with right now, and still stay in your peaceful state and invite others to do the same?
Yeah. And I think it connects to the question that Mighty Lee just posted in the chat. Like, what about brown and Black children who need to be in schools, mental health and community with teachers who are vaccinated? Oh, yeah. It's so complex. Yeah, thank you for that. As I respond to your question and hold Mighty Lee's in mind, I'd love for our colleagues from Westminster that are supporting with the tech, I hope if we can put everybody in gallery view. I want to see everybody. If possible, I want to just kind of bring everybody in. I think it's time to, if possible, as I'm responding to the question, you can set that up, but we can bring everybody into the gallery view. I want to say to that, that mindfulness, as you all know, is a very popular practice. And, there are many forms of mindfulness. One traditional way is to sit quietly and just sit quietly with your thoughts and just sit with what's coming up for you. It could be a walking meditation of walking really slow. It can be an eating meditation and just eating really slow. All of it is in the spirit of basically slowing down. In fact, the definition of mindfulness from one of the leading scholars, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, it's defined as paying attention to the present moment, non-judgmentally. So when it comes to conversations about race, right, and racism and structural inequality that gets so heated on so many fronts. On one level, some of us who don't feel like or understand how we might be racist struggle to think about what does it mean to be anti-racist, or there's a heat that comes with wrestling with that question. On the other hand, some of us who live inside bodies that have continuously been hurt, ignored, derailed, the heat from that pain also is activated. So part of what using mindfulness appropriately is when we're having these heated conversations about race and racism, we use practice to slow down enough so that the intensity and the intense emotions that may come up from having such a conversation and discourse doesn't overwhelm us and shut the conversation down. In fact, there's a point where you can deploy mindfulness enough where you can stay in the conversation longer. You can stay in the heat of the conversation longer. You can stay in it. So part of part of the practice is to deploy mindfulness to become more resilient in this work. In terms of how I came to it, you know, it was a gradual phenomenon. You know, me trying to engage in self-care, doing a little bit of yoga here, doing a little bit of capoeira here, a little bit of, you know, my background was in anthropology, so I was seeing in different traditions, there was across all traditions, there are different practices to slow down, cultural and religious, right? Even in the Christian tradition, there's contemplative prayer itself as a form of meditation, right? So what are the practices that we engage in just to kind of slow down, because in the slowing down, what happens is that our nervous system is given the opportunity to reset, to recharge. So often, especially during the pandemic, what's called the sympathetic system, which is our fight, flee, or freeze response, that part of our system is overactive. So if you find yourself feeling irritated or more impulsive or more edgy these days, is because our nervous system right now is primed to be on survival mode and to be overactive. So we must engage in practices to activate the other part of our nervous system, the parasympathetic system. And that system allows us to kind of chill. So, and I also say, sister, that mindfulness won't solve everything. Mindfulness will only give us the tool for us to become more present to the pain, more present to each other, which will result in having more clarity in terms of how to approach and address. So very, very important. Mindfulness will not solve this. The pain is too deep. Structures that are in place are too deep, right?
Wow.
So
Yes.
that's what I would say.
Thank you for all of that. And thank you to the chat. Thank you for those who are able to stay. And we recognize that I think we only have 20 minutes left, right? Is that right?
No, we have we're gonna go a little. Our schedule is till 9:30, but
Oh,
we know
wonderful.
that people, yeah, in terms of our time, Eastern time.
Oh,
But
yes.
we'll go for a little longer. We know that it's a long engagement, so we won't go for the full 2 hours if folks will need to transition. But for now, we have time. So I think
Beautiful.
now it's a good time to do a sit. Yes, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, listen, you had me at about 15 minutes ago.
All right. Thank you, Catherine, for in the chat asking for more, inviting us to have more clarity and creativity. So wherever you are right now, wherever you are, in front of your screen, in front of your phone, in front of your iPad, whatever device you're using, I want you to take a moment just to kind of really sit back on your chair, in your chair. Just sit back in your chair, wherever you're seated. Sit back in your chair. We are going to do about a 5 to 6 minute practice together. This is a very basic practice. For those of you who are new to meditation and to mindfulness, welcome. You will learn a lot in just the next few minutes. For those of you who have done meditation before, welcome back. For those of you who've done meditation and haven't had a really good experience, take care of yourself. Just take care of yourself. If you need to not participate, don't. Just know that you're here with us together in community. We have so many people with us. So begin by gently closing your eyes if you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, just hold a soft gaze away from the screen. And just begin by naturally breathing in your normal breathing pattern. Just gently breathing in Gently breathing out your natural breath. See if you can gently take a deeper breath. This time breathing deep inside your stomach, filling up your belly. And on your exhale, see if you can empty that breath slowly. Any thoughts that come up, just acknowledge them. Just acknowledge them and bring your attention right back to the tip of your nose. Breathing in deeply. Bringing your attention to your chair and just sensing that chair. Sensing the solidity of that chair holding you up. Bringing your attention to your back. Sensing that powerful structure, that spinal cord that keeps us erect. On your next exhale, see if you can let your shoulders drop a little bit. On your next exhale, see if you can let your shoulders just melt even more to the sides. And bring your attention to your right hand. Bringing your attention to your right hand. And whatever feelings come up, just acknowledge them. Any resistance, acknowledge it. Any anxiety, acknowledge it. And then bring your right hand right to your chest. Right to your chest. Holding yourself. Breathing into whatever is arising from holding yourself in this way. Taking a deep breath and see if you can have a lighter hold on your chest, just a little lighter touch on your chest. Having a light holding of your chest. That right there is what it feels like to be gentle with oneself, to be self-compassionate towards oneself. You deserve to rest. You deserve to heal. One more minute this last practice, keeping your right hand on your chest, take your left hand and placing it right over your belly. Right over your belly. And continuing to breathe gently. That the belly is a powerful area where we have our will, our courage, yet also so tender in our insecurity, our vulnerability. So sensing into that stomach, sensing into that belly, holding that belly gently. And here we hold both our chest and our stomach so gently. Continuing to breathe. This moment here, you are holding yourself. This moment here, we can take as an opportunity to visualize us holding each other in this community. Us holding Utah and Westminster College. Us holding this country in need of so much healing and repair. Us holding this tender and precious planet. We hold it all lightly. Taking one more deep breath. And at your own pace, at your own time, just gradually open your eyes. Gradually come back at your own pace, at your own time. I want to thank you for your willingness to do that practice. I want to also ask if you'd like to put your video on, only if you'd like. We'd love to see people in the gallery, but no pressure. And I'd love to invite Sister Yolanda to share what's coming up for you, sis. And then after that, I want to dedicate the rest of our time together to the audience and getting some audience questions and to hear some voices from the audience. What do you think?
Yes, I just want to say thank you and want to hear from those of us in the community. I thank you for that. That felt centering, and knowing what we have coming up next, what we're going to share around Dr. King, and actually a response to Dr. King's death in 1968 prepares me. So I thank you for that. I thank you. That's all I have. I would love to hear from the community.
Yeah. So why don't we do this? Let's talk to the folks. Oh my God, everybody looks so beautiful. Oh my God. Let's talk for let's talk for a little bit, and then if it feels right, sister, we can bring that video in. Hey everybody, look at that beautiful baby. Hey Elise,
Wow,
look at that little baby girl.
And David, oh, I love you.
Hey Rebecca, hey Cassandra, hey Megan,
Quincy.
hey Pamela.
Look at these
Quincy.
beautiful people, my Lord.
Oh my God, that's the next generation right there.
Yes.
Hey Chelsea Solorzano, I see you. Frontline worker, thank you for
Eleanor
that. Thank you for your service.
I see Coletta Lynch.
Oh my God. Hey Katy Perry.
I see Katy Perry. I saw you last night. You did a great job. Juan and Shanae.
Juwan, yeah. Let's take a moment just to see each other. I mean,
is it Obaid?
Yeah.
What a beautiful name. My goodness. Cordelia. Hello.
Yeah.
Tiare.
Yeah, Brother Harrison.
Right? My goodness. Jonas. Yes, Chels. Thank you for your service.
Yeah,
Stephanie. Stephanie on the treadmill. Get it, Stephanie. That's right.
It.
Self-care. On top of self-care. On top of self-care.
Critical love.
Critical love of the self. Oh my goodness.
So,
yes.
Sister, let's ask the audience. So what do you all think? What are you feeling? Any thoughts? Any questions? Let's jump in. You can, if you want to, you can raise your hand on the little thing, or you can just jump right in. It's enough of us. So just jump right in. Anybody want to share anything? Any thought? Any question? Please unmute yourself and hop in.
Yes. Oh, I'm looking at the love in the Quincy box. So beautiful.
Harrison, yeah, Harrison. We have one hand up. Harrison, please.
Ah, let's go for it.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, like, maybe I kind of joined in late because I was doing other things, but the thing that you're most optimistic about in the next 4 years with this new administration in its entirety, with everyone that's involved in it.
Sister Yoli, what do you think?
Oh yeah, for me, very easy. It's around education, and we actually have somewhat of an ear to some people at the White House. So there's so many things that we have on the docket. We would love for a standardized test to go away. We don't know if that's going to happen right away, but there's enough of us across the country that are pushing for that. You know, culturally, this idea of culturally responsive education, humanizing pedagogy. There are scholars who have been doing this work for 40, 50 years. We feel very hopeful that we have an administration that's open to it. The pausing of the pandemic is, we're hearing that they're willing to listen a little bit differently. So I, from an education standpoint, feel very encouraged. We know that in higher ed, this has shifted our world. There will be some folks who may never come back to education, but we're seeing that, at least in my world here at TC, people are signing up for masters and PhDs and coming into education. So I'm hopeful that we will have a new generation of educators, a new generation of nurses. We've lost so many of our nurses and our doctors. I pray that folks in the health professions will not turn away from the moment, but go into the moment to realize that need. But from an educational standpoint, and stuff that's happening in New York, and some ear that we do have towards the White House, I'm feeling very hopeful, hopefully praying for standardized tests to go away.
Yeah. Thank you for that, sister. You know, and Harrison, as I respond to your question, I wanna make a comment around something that we're all feeling right now, because sure, we have a Democrat in office, but the reality is that our country is so polarized right now that politics is so contentious, right? Even in our own families, right? So I want to say that, sure, we have President Biden in the office, and in terms of what across the next 4 years, the benefit to that is that there will be a more aligned response to the pandemic, which will allow us to actually see each other sooner than later. There'll also be a little bit more respect in terms of international perception of the United States and its leadership. That's just facts. And that's very important. It's very important for us because I love this country, and they're watching. People are watching how we engage in the democratic process. People are watching. And I'm talking to all of you here. We know that in a group of 59 people, we're all going to have different political persuasions. So this is just a general comment around the fundamental decency of a democratic process that respects the rule of law, that respects the fact that there is a virus that is ravaging a country and it needs to be taken seriously. That education cannot be given to someone who never was a teacher. I mean, this is not political. This is more pragmatic. So I think the next 4 years, hopefully, will bring a little bit more pragmatic policy, and then we'll see what happens. We'll see how they do. We'll see how Democrats do, and then it'll be the classic political pendulum, right? We'll continue swinging along, you know, Democrat, Republican, until we end up maybe developing some third parties, right? So I don't mean to respond to that question in a partisan way, but in a really real way. That the type of challenges that our global community is facing, the type of challenges that we're facing as a local and national community, we need leadership. We need firm, clear leadership. We can't have ego get in the way. The problems are too big. The problems are too big. And I, with all due respect, I wish my brother Trump the best. I want that brother to get some help, some support. You know, I think, go chill, you know, take a little vacation in Mar-a-Lago. But I would also say, stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. You know, leave governance for those who have experience, you know, and I think it's a really big lesson learned for all of us. Stay in your lane, or else, you know, we all struggle. We all struggle. So I'll just say that I hope that there's more pragmatism, and I also hope that the Republican Party learns a lot in terms of how to really have a little bit more of a moral compass. Sister Shauna?
Yes, it is. It's Shauna. So I'm looking for a little bit of advice. I too am split with my family. My sister and I fall on the Democratic, what I would say more respectful side than the Trump bullying that we've seen in 4 years with our parents. And I'm wondering, what advice would you give to respectfully deal with the mistruths, right? The misinformation, disinformation that they are ingrained in for 4 years of what Trump has been laying out as you know, these are lies and things were stolen and all that stuff. I'm really struggling with putting myself in their shoes and seeing fully from their perspective, and it creates tension. And I'm in Utah and they're back east, and sometimes I guess I poke the bear a little bit because I want to know where they're coming from. I haven't quite mustered the courage to talk to them about whether or not they watched the inauguration, if they listened to the speech, did they hear what he had to say, do they believe at all what he says? But I would really appreciate any type of guidance of how to respectfully deal with that tension, and just struggling to really understand when I don't feel like I was brought up in the way that the character of Donald Trump, and yet my parents support him over what I think is a more moral, respectful, non-divisive strong leadership style.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Sister. Yes, so Yoli, what do you think? You're muted.
Yeah, there were a couple of things, Jana, that I was thinking, first and foremost, to that self-excavation with yourself. What is it that you desire from them? Are you trying to change their minds? Are you trying to, what is it that you desire? And oftentimes it's that we want people to see our perspective, right? And it's the same thing with them. I first say this, respectfully, they're your parents. They're likely older than you are, and they probably are not going to shift as much, right, at this point. And so it is, coming back with them with love. I would say that kind of critical love and kind of showing the facts. And here's the thing, we actually have 400 years of receipts. So we actually have an enslavement situation that has happened. We actually have, women not being able to have rights. We have 400 years of receipts that really cannot be ignored. So I'm curious, what is the humanity that they see in some of the things that Trump talks about? And you're a human being that they raised, and your sister. So, my question is always, number one, what is it that you desire from them? Is it that you want them to change? Number two, are they even open to hearing it? Because that could also create a frustration and then a dividing of the family. And ultimately, I have an uncle, I just love on him, and I tell my truth. And I say, well, can we talk about some facts here? And that's often when people don't want to talk. They don't want to deal with the facts. And then I even use that as a point to say, you see, I'm willing to listen to you. I'm trying to share facts, and you're shutting me out. So it's that excavation. Shauna, I don't know if that helps, but it's the same thing when I want to talk about white supremacy and racism and the stuff that I do in my classroom. There's this ego and this fear that, oh my gosh, you're trying to convert how I think. And if I start thinking how you think, I'm going to lose myself. So it's that decentering of the what are they holding on to, and what do they believe they're going to lose if they listen to what you're talking about?
Question. I guess number one, there's a fear because I don't ever want it to permanently divide us. I see my dad who has a military background.
Oh, okay.
So that creates its own reality. But I think that one thing that I've come to understand is they focus on their facts from their considered source of truth,
Yeah.
and yet I do the same. So, but to me, their sources are much more limited than the sources that I see and the reality and the data, and yet they're saying their facts are true.
Okay.
So that's really hard to combat, and combat's not the right word I want to use.
Mhm.
But I want to understand their perspective, and yes, I'd love for them to see. I think there's just a big disconnect with the way I perceive being brought up, and them supporting someone who is just so disgraceful for me.
Yes.
Not the way I felt like I was brought up, and yet they're supporting someone with the poorest character I have ever seen in a leader. And I can't comprehend it.
And Shauna, I want to say, I know Cassandra and Melanie have their hand and they may have something to share, but number one, you know, you're not alone, but there's certain things that political parties and news sources can't, it can't change or color.
Yeah.
George Floyd having a knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 36 seconds, whether it's on this source or that source,
yeah,
there's purity and truth in that. And so what are some of the things that we can look at that are so inhumane, and then to look at the responses or the sometimes the quiet around it can also be the beginning of a conversation. What do you think, mom and dad, with a murder like that was so public, what do you think our leaders should have said? When Charlottesville happened, what mom and dad, what do you think is the most human response that would bring us together as humans? Because ultimately you are making a decision that it is the division that matters more than the unity. And that might be hard. That might be hard to see.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on it too, but I'm gonna circle back to you a little later. I promise I got some good stuff.
Okay.
I've been in situations with my family that gotten a little heated. Mm-hmm. Let's have
Cassandra,
then
Melanie, Elise.
Melanie, then Ellie. Yeah, Cassandra.
Yeah, I just wanted to just express how alive and full I feel being with a group that just echoes so much of what I have been leaning toward, I feel like, for a long time. And there's definitely just like, it's a vision, right? A vision to pursue, but it also has so much echo. And I am just really excited. I'm graduating from nursing school soon. I'm on the board with the Utah Permaculture Collective, and we've been having so many conversations about race and community and trying to create brave spaces and gather around gardening and wellness and being kind to the earth. And I have worked at the homeless shelter and have always felt so drawn toward being able to heal, which is what we're really talking about, right? Finding this self-healing, finding this healing for others, because that's where the lashing out comes from, right? And so how can we peel back all those layers? This is so alive in me, and it's so just enriching to be in this virtual room of just the kernel, the kernel of humanity, of human life. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share. So thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. And Sister Yoli, could you tell Cassandra what you wrote in the chat so you can hear your voice?
Oh, I said you're a healer, sis. Don't run from it. Run towards it. And usually those who choose the type of profession, nursing, teaching, masseuse, people who want to be balm in Gilead, you're a healer. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that this resonates. Thank you for choosing that profession.
Yeah, Melanie?
It's beautiful.
I just wanted to say thanks for sharing your model. I think that it has so so much applicability for in many areas. So I wanted to say that, and to shout out about that division in family in terms of different sides. I think probably most of us have that in our families, and it is, I'll just reiterate the challenge of that in doing that. And then the other thing I wanted to raise that's related to that is the perpetuation of media. And I don't know what to do about that. I mean, I sit here and I switch back and forth between Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, PBS, and you'll just hear stark differences, right? Left and right. And so, and I get very frustrated. And I'm an educator, so I know that we educate, but my goodness, we got, lineage to the White House. Perhaps you could help that out a little bit. I don't know. I guess I'm commenting that it's so frustrated, and I don't know as an individual person or even a group of 75 what we can do about that. And I'm sure somebody's smart enough to share that with me, but that's my biggest frustration right now, because the power of the media shapes so many people who think they know, for example, what good research is, but they can't articulate what a methodology is. So that's a huge frustration. But so yeah, but your model so much appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. We'll have Elise, then Emma, then Eleanor. Elise.
Well, I'm excited to be able to unmute and chat for a minute because Dr. Ruiz was my teacher at TC. Our teacher.
And David, I'm hugging both of you.
Love. I met my husband in her class, so there's some critical love. I'm critical, and he loves me. So I taught in the Bronx for 7 years before moving to Salt Lake, and so I've been here for about 4 years, and I think my desire to get into teaching, social justice, activism, restorative justice, transformative justice, was what kind of compelled me, motivated me. And I'm finding as I'm here that the field is white and ready to harvest, and it is white. And I'm finding that, there's a lot of work that needs to happen here. And I'm so worried for 2021 school year fall. How do we bounce back from this? I have students who are gone, who are lost. And they're my students of color. They're my BIPOC students. And I know that they're the ones who need it the most. And I'm sorry to hog the mic because I asked you that question earlier about us going back to school and the families that were suing our school district, who kind of co-opted stories of our students of color, saying that they were worried about those students and they needed to be back in the classroom. And I know that so many of my students have taken on 3 jobs because they've had to support multiple family members. And so school hasn't been the #1 priority. And I'm curious your thoughts, Dr. Acosta and Dr. Ruiz, about how we transition back to some sort of normal, especially in the sphere of public schools.
Yeah, that's a big question, Elise. I'll just say that we won't be transitioning to a normal. We're transitioning to a very new kind of society and relations, and that the way we reach those students that have gone off grid will be through relationships. The one thing to keep in mind, and I'm drawing here on Indigenous wisdom. You see, Indigenous people and people in general have gone through incredible crises. So we have to like sit in full integrity with being grounded right now. So my simple response to you is that, yeah, the fall will be hard, but it will be made easier by the quality of our relationships to each other. So for example, our relationships to those kids who are off grid, how are we tending to those relationships, right? We know that those kids who are off grid, bringing them back to school won't necessarily work by saying, come back to school. It'll really come through, hey, what do you need? Are you hungry? Are you working? Are you, it'll come through those other relationships that they will feel the warmth they will be reminded of the warmth of the social relations that come from the school. They will come back. They will recognize that they need more education. They will recognize that they do need some kind of certification to make it in the adult world. So it will be our relationships that will get us back. Sister Yoli, any thoughts there?
Yeah, Elise, first of all, I love you and David and your beautiful child, and I miss you. And I think that when we talk about, when people saying get back to normal, I think it is a very Western, it is a very white-centric way of thinking. When Brother Angel talks about indigenous practices, and just think about how old the earth is, and we're just a little tiny dot. Here we are trying to make our mark. But we are always trying to fix it and get it back to something that we recognize that we can have some sort of control. What this moment is teaching is that we do not have control. And that for those of us who believe in God, have God as the center, our faith helps us in this moment to know that this too shall pass, right? And that, you know, the earth is millions of years old. And so it's gone through, it's new for us in this generation, but it is not new to the earth. And so I think sometimes we have to even resist that. It's hard to resist it in the moment because you do want the answers. You know, people are suffering. I have people in my own family that are suffering, that I'm thinking, you know what, I'm glad that I have this money that I can at least help them eat, you know, for the next couple of weeks or maybe pay rent. But we're all going to have to figure out what this is going to look like together. And this is where grassroots comes in. This is where we have to be heard. I don't even really understand how we're going to get through this. I know this, I don't want to go back to what public schools were. I really don't want that, Elise. Like, I don't want standardized tests. I don't want what I grew up with and what Black and brown children, because it has not served us. It doesn't serve the teachers either. So I don't have the answer. I just know this is where faith comes in. This is where understanding that we cannot control this moment. The best we can do is lean on each other, and in our small communities, try to make sure people are eating. This is like what's happening in the school district I'm working with. Food drives are happening. People are doing GoFundMes. Like, people are responding to the now. And of course, you know, within meditation, Buddhist tradition, all we have is today. All we have is this moment. So what are we going to do as a community? What is Westminster going to do as a community to help those in the community that are suffering? The school districts, how can you come together to respond to the now? And literally, it is one moment at a time. I know it's not what we usually, you know, say, but I don't think any of us have the answers. That's why we need each other. Sister Eleanor, help us out with this. What are you thinking?
Yeah. We'll have Sister Eleanor, and then we'll have Emma. Go ahead.
I first want to say thank you. Thank you for guiding us in these conversations today. This is hard for me. I had shared earlier in the chat that I feel vulnerable as a new faculty member of color at Westminster. I'm coming from the community of San Diego, California, and this is a very different space for me as a person of color. I appreciated hearing earlier, Dr. Ruiz, about naming. And that made me think about how it wasn't immediately, but eventually, when it was named that January 6th at the US Capitol was an insurrection, and white supremacists were at the center of that. And that was powerful for me to hear as a person of color who's been in education also a very long time, starting first in K-12 as an urban teacher, and then now in higher education. Because I feel like in a lot of ways, both in my experience in K-12 and in higher ed, people hush the reality. So as you said, the power of naming what we saw and what we witnessed as a nation. And for me now, as a beginning academic, to be able to name that in the classes that I teach and with the students that I work with and with my colleagues, and then also in the research work, because my research methodology is phenomenology and lived experience. And part of that methodology is the power of naming, that we have to
Mhm.
bring that phenomenon into the light and give it its due. So I really want to say to you genuinely to hear about your work and your encouragement as you as longtime scholars of color that I look towards as I develop in my own way in the academy. But I do agree, these are difficult times, but I also agree I'm very excited because
Mhm.
now I
Yep.
think with the pain, there's an opening to that wound. And I do agree, we can't go back to the quote unquote normal, because that normal advantaged certain populations and it disadvantages others historically over time. So I just really appreciate that you created this space, and then Dr. Stevenson, that you brought us together for this opportunity, because I know I'm trying to find my way in this space because it's very different from the communities of color and Title I schools and living on the border and watching those children be caged was very powerful for me. So I want to stay in touch with you.
Oh, I
because
was
Yeah.
going to say, Sister
'cause I know
Eleanor,
that's
I would
really
love
important.
to exchange emails. Let's, we don't have to be in the same state to have community.
Yeah.
And what a blessing you are to the Westminster community. How powerful, how powerful. And for those of you on this line here, hold Sister Eleanor, because the academy can be very cruel. And so if she's expressing this, and some of you may be feeling it, but not expressing it, you've got to hold each other. So sis, Dr. Angel and I are here for you. And I'm excited to talk to you by phone and Angel knows this. This is how we make friends all over the world. Elise knows this. Elise knows that she can email me. How many years has it been? And I'm still here. So
Yeah, and can I just close with one real quick thing? I knew
Yes.
that I came to the right place when one of my Latinx students last semester, we were having a virtual office hour, and she said, wait a minute, Dr. Castillo, before we talk about the support I need, I want you to know that you are the first professor of color I've ever had at Westminster. So thank you for choosing to come here. And so I do believe, as you said, that we're in moments for a particular reason. So thank you for extending the opportunity to stay in touch with you. I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, she means that. She means that, and I mean it too. We'll circle back to this, but I think what happened tonight was so special that we should do a part 2 of some kind. And so I'll take the leadership there in terms of getting us together again at some point.
Thank
I want to give
Dr. Acosta for that.
Yeah.
I was praying.
No, yeah. So we'll do that. Let me make sure that Emma gets her voice heard, and then my brother Obaid, if I'm saying his name correctly. But Emma, please.
Hi. So I ask this question all the time, and I'm very sorry to Marilee and Heather, who are my instructors and have heard me ask this over and over and over again. But I am a pre-service secondary English teacher. And as a white educator, how do I make sure that my practice is loving and accessible for my students of color?
Yeah. So Yoli, you can take that one.
Yeah, so Emma, you're one of my people. The first thing is we know when we are loving and we know when we're not. And I think that's where the self-excavation comes in, Emma. You have to think about, and this is the deep stuff of looking at family, looking at, where you were raised, how you were raised, what you were told about children of color, and really not being afraid to hold up that mirror, to have an accountability partner that you can say, the things that you're thinking, right? To know that part of that, we've all been bamboozled, right? Because people of color have to deal with internalized racism too, right? So you, Emma, absolutely need a space that is brave, that is safe. You need an accountability partner to say the things that you think that are racist, biased, stereotypical, to release them so that you can replace it with genuine love. And the thing is being human with them. Be human with the students in front of you. Want for them, Emma, what you want for yourself. Want for them what you want for your little sister, your little brother, your little cousin. And that's when you know that you are loving. And again, that critical love, that you're not afraid when they say things, or if they say, Miss Emma, you just did that because I'm Black, that doesn't make you freeze, that you say, you lean into that and say, let's talk about that. And that you actually think, did I say something or do something to make that child say that? So being open and generous with yourself, honest with yourself, Emma and all of us, not just Emma. Emma had the courage to straight up ask. But you have to understand, Emma, that we are in a society that is 400 years deep in racism. There is no way that anyone on this call can claim that they are not racist. Now, you can be recovering racist, you're working towards anti-racism, you're working against internalized racism, but that impacts all of us. And that's the bell hooks. Once we get to the part that we start telling the truth, that honesty can lead to love. And then you will know. And guess what, Emma? They're going to feel it, because kids in particular, they know love when they see it. Sometimes they resist it because they're like, who are you to love me? That's another conversation. But if you're consistent and your heart is real and open, Emma, you will see your classroom change, and you will not need a professional development to tell you how to do it.
So take a moment. I added a link to the chat. If you're interested in staying in touch with us, go ahead and add your email to that document. You can pull it up and then send a submit later if you'd like, or submit it now. But submit your email, and then I know that Sister Tamara is gonna send some stuff out. But we're willing to kind of come back, or at least organize something else. Brother Obaid, are you still there? Did you want to share?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Thank you so much for being here and for this amazing and really humanizing conversation. I have two questions. The first one is, as a person of color and Muslim, we face discrimination and racism all the time. So when do we start existing and stop resisting? And how do we unearth that critical love for ourselves to the little pieces of power that we have access to? And the second question is that I saw that Dr. Acosta was drinking a cup of tea earlier. So I'm really interested to see like what kind of tea were you actually drinking, because I'm a really big tea fan as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really exotic tea. It's like a passion fruit matcha. So so yeah. So brother, I think let me take care of your question, and then we'll have Yolanda do some closing remarks. And I'll answer your question by also turning back to the question that Shauna rose in terms of being in a divisive relationship with family, because it's all connected, finding our power in our communities, finding our power in our families. So to you directly, brother, I would say you're what you've been waiting for. You're what we've been waiting for. Nobody's coming to save us. The answer is simple. Do the work. Do the work. Find colleagues like us, people who are energized, who are willing to stay in the game and do the work. That's, I mean, the temper of the times we're living in right now, we do need poetry and language to inspire us, but we need our hands to do the work. So and then more importantly, to the question around being in a divisive family, to Shauna, I've been in a relationship with my aunt in this way, and what I shifted, because there was no fact, there was no data, there was no theory that I could ever say in the most sophisticated way that would change her opinion. And I noticed that. So as opposed to like starting a conversation with her and getting into it and then flaring up when one of those points that probably came from just some random corner of the internet, what I started to do was actually slow down how I was responding to her. Even when she said something that I really disagreed with, I would say something like, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that." "Yeah, you got it from there? Oh, that's interesting." "Yeah." And what ended up happening with her particularly, she saw that I was so present to her because everybody else he's talking to is being repulsed. Everybody else is like, you know, leaving or cutting her off. But I was just right there. I was like, yeah, that's real. That's real, D. That's real, D. What's that, auntie? Yeah, you know, tell me more. So she saw that I was right there as her nephew. And the funny thing is, in this story, in this particular moment, recently, it was like it was a breakthrough. And all I did was be true to the fact that I love her and just be present to the relationship. Regardless of which, I was just present. And there was something about the fact that she wasn't convincing me and the fact that I was loving her that led to her kind of like, just kind of seeing a particular issue differently. So it's going to take some time, but there's something there. There's something there about us being present in our relationships with those who we disagree most in such a way that they almost like question themselves by the love that we radiate. That's all I'll say.
Thank you.
Mr. Yoli, could you close us out?
Yes, and I want to say something to you, Brother Obaid. Your hadith will have to, it must ground you. You must know that Allah is with you in all that you do. There are, my best friend, Dr. Golnasar Muhammad, does this work very publicly. I would have you look her up. She does this work and she's driven by her hadith. She's driven by her faith. And she faces a lot of prejudice. But when Brother Angel says, do the work, you, yes, have to do the work. You have to be grounded in your hadith, and you also have to have your community. So who are, not to say that the folks here can't be part of your community, but it's going to get to a certain point when you have to turn to the Quran, you have to turn to your faith that those here in this community may not understand. I only get through the things I get through because of Angel, because of Goldie, because of some of my other, let's say, Christian brothers and sisters, my other Muslim brothers and sisters, that we are of the like mind. So Angel's right. No one's going to save us, not even anyone here. We can build a tighter community, but remember your faith and your teachings and let that guide you. And as long as it is based in humanity and in love, you will prevail, even when sometimes it's very hurtful. So I just wanted to share that from you, what I learned from Goldie. The last thing I want to say, I just want to share my screen one last time, and I want to read something to you. Can you see this? Or am I failing at this too?
No, we see it. We see it.
No,
Okay.
that is absolutely amazing. And if no one anyone has not seen or read her entire speech, please do. It was impressive, beautifully written, and eloquently and passionately delivered.
Thank you, Sister Shauna. And I just want to close out by taking maybe an extra 1 minute to read a little bit more before we get to this. But one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we're left with. Every breath from my bronze pounded chest will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover, and every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The dawn, new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. Are we brave enough to be the light that is needed in the lives of children, students at Westminster, people in our community? That is the question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope it was nourishing, and you all stay strong, you know. and it's going to be an intense time moving forward. But we're going to do it together, and we'll see if we'll gather another event for you all. And so, Tamara, we'll give it back to you to close formally.
Yes, and we had this great MLK video and talked about kindness and compassion, so we'll figure something out.
So Jan is going to close us out. We have some announcements, but I just want to thank you all for all of the attendees who just hung with us throughout figuring out the technology. If you noticed, we shifted everybody to be panelists so we can have the gallery view, which was our original intent. And so technology did not win tonight. So thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much for just hanging with us. And it was rich all the way through, but being able to see our faces is what Dr. Angel and Dr. Yolanda had wanted in the beginning, just enriches us. It enriched me. And as I promised, it went fast, right? Because you all are still here, still hungry for more of this. So I'm very thankful to hear that we can figure something out for a follow-up of some sort. And so my eternal gratitude goes to Dr. Angel and Dr. Yolanda. This was like a tidbit of what I experienced in the archaeology of self, but still so impactful. And I'm just in awe and admiration and eternal gratitude. Thank you so much for being here, for doing this. And I don't think there's been an MLK experience like this ever on the planet. So we set the tone, we set a new tradition here. So thank you so much. Jan, do you want me to start the announcements and then you can join in?
Sure. You had slides I thought you wanted to share. We just have a little information where we can go forward with this. This is not the end, this is the beginning.
So we could not end tonight without sharing Dr. Yolanda's upcoming book she co-wrote with Deetra Price Dennis, Advancing Racial Literacies in Teacher Education. It's coming out in, I believe, May 2021, but you can pre-order from the Teachers College Press website. And so you've just gotten a little tidbit of the depth of Dr. Yolanda's approach to teacher education. And this will certainly enhance we have an amazing School of Ed. I consider that my second home. So there's just so much utility that I think anyone could find in this work. This book is just another iteration of what Dr. Yolanda does. So check it out. Teachers College Press is where you can learn more. And then Jan, I will move this on to you and you tell me when to advance.
Okay. So dear Tamara asked us to share some of the things that we're doing here in the next few weeks that are on the same theme of creating some safe spaces, some brave and courageous places that you can come and participate in further conversations. And Carrie Lindsay shared these from the Diversity and Inclusion Office, that Thursdays starting January 28th, the ongoing series begins for this semester. And you can contact Dylan and the information is there. They will be sending out information. And the same thing, Blackness is Art Workshop. This is just to give you little teasers here, starting Wednesday. And that is for the BIPOC population and students only. So look, go ahead and forward, Tamara. There, from the Global Peace and Spirituality Office, we have this whole long list of things, and that February 11th will be a call to building race unity, courageous conversations with a grant that we've got on courageous pluralism with Westminster and Brigham Young University students and faculty, and you'll be hearing more about that. The book read, which is on the next page, but there's a book called Constructing Social Reality from a Baha'i Perspective. We've been having a Muslim and a Christian and now a Baha'i book that we're reading, and the faculty and staff have been reading over the summer. And the book over the summer was called Out of Many Faiths by Eboo Patel, Religious Diversity and the American Promise. We'll also be having a Coexist Cafe on February 16th with students and faculty discussing that as a panel. You can see Heart Talks Race Unity and Social Cohesion, the first Sunday of the month at 5 p.m. for discussions like this. We've started in the summer and they're a lot more intimate, but we'd love to invite you all to be a part. Please email me and we'll give you the information. Why don't we go ahead to the next page? This is the book group. And I think if you just want this book, we have 15 copies as part of a grant for increasing unity and diversity on campuses. And if you are interested, those that were in the summer book reads certainly have first chance to the free copies, but anyone that's interested, please email me and we'd love to get you involved in the discussions. I just wanted to say again, thank you so much for all of you for being here. We have faculty, staff, and students from leadership in the student body to leadership on the campus, and really appreciate every single soul, because it won't change until each one of us really takes a look at ourselves, does that deep dive, thinks about critical love, and how all is really one, as Black Elk has told us. And as Martin Luther King, you can't cure hate with hate, only love can. And I think one of the words that Amanda Gorman said as well, I was going to read some quotes of that as my closing. So you gave the most beautiful. I think we're all feeling that love from Amanda Gorman. And one of the things she said, besides what you read so beautifully for us, was that history has its eyes on us. And what we are doing now is the work. And that everyone came tonight. Continue to find your friends of different backgrounds to connect with. And that is in our families, but it's also in the global family. If we are all one, we're all more interconnected. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Martin Luther King. A quote that I love that always empowers me is, "So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth." We'll see you in the future, all of you. We all know we're all out there together. We're all in this struggle together.
Take care.
It's Pastor Marlon. Thanks for the words.
Have a beautiful night and a glorious weekend.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I don't want to leave this space.